Welcome. So, I would like to invite you to our new series that we're calling the What, Why, Who, and How webinar series, where we showcase many different use cases or many different solutions built with AI on the Microsoft 365 platform that's really meant improve that we can move the needle on productivity, market share, revenue, wherever the case may be for an organization that leverage this AI tool. If you know me, if you follow some of my social posts, I'm a huge advocate of leveraging AI to move the productivity needle and not so much get caught up in the fanfare of the pretty images that are created by the AI, the awesome videos that are created by the AI. Like all of those are great. And in some industries, those mean a lot. But I see a really imbalance of that's become the fanfare of AI. And I think there's a huge gap between the capabilities of AI in rich media versus real business productivity piece. So in this webinar, we're going to take a closer look at contract management for an organization where the contracts are hosted in a SharePoint library. And now we're leveraging AI hosted in Azure, or more specifically, the model Azure OpenAI. I think we're using the GPT-4, and we charge to unpack one of what that solution looks like, why that solution is important, who does this solution benefit the most within the organization, and then the technical deep dive on how we piece it. Okay, so in this session, what we want to talk about is how to manage contracts using the latest AI technology within Microsoft 365. So as we know, contracts are critical, right? For organizations that sometimes are not on top of the review period of contracts, a contract may auto-renew on you, maybe not in favorable terms for the organization. You may have terms and conditions that need to change based on regulatory requirements or maybe changes in the industry or political or government changes within the federal space or your state space or the county space. So we have many different reasons on why we need to stay up on top of these contracts and most importantly, have them reviewed and make sure we stay on top of the review period. So how do we handle this here in Microsoft 365 and what could possibly change when you pepper in AI? So here you see on my screen, I have contracts draft. These are all the contracts that need to be reviewed and processed on an annual basis. And then I have contracts in standard, which these are the ones that have been processed by AI. And you can see that 86 of these are processed by AI. So what do these look like? So if I click on draft, these 600, and again, and this is probably for more of a smaller, medium-sized organization. So you can see how this would be exponentially more depending on the size of the organization and the type of business that you're in. So these have all types of contracts. Now, these are master service agreements. You can see this is an office lease agreement, a non-disclosure, so on and so forth. So what most organizations prior to AI, what they're doing is that we're loading in all these contracts. Hopefully, there's always a challenge, one, to get them all in a centralized location. And then once we have them in a centralized location, we set up some type of Power Platform, Power Automate workflow to where these get reviewed. And then there's a review period set. And then there's a reminder, let's say 60 days prior to that review period, where a paralegal or someone in legal takes a look at it and just make sure that it's in alignment with the current status and goals of the organization and the regulatory requirements and the state, county, or federal requirements for their particular industry. So someone's actually going through each one of these. If I click inside of this, and this is not proprietary information, I actually had a artificial intelligence batch process with Python generate 1,000 of these in like 30 minutes. This is the new world that we live in, where you can have sample data created with AI, similar to the format that your real data's in. So that way you can test this AI with fictitious data and you're not running client related or business secret or business confidential data through the development or testing process, right? So that's the benefit of this. But here you can see that this is like a standard contract, multi-page contract with the signature line and so on and so forth. So what we need to do when we store these is if I go back here and look at the library that have these processed. So if I go into contracts where I have 86 of these being processed, for each contract, we need to extract out the risk level, the contract type. As you saw in that raw form, I have many different contract types in one bucket. So if it's an office lease, it's a supplier contract, maybe a vendor agreement, a partnership agreement, so on and so forth. The AI gives it a risk level. This is the justification of why it gave that risk a medium, right? So they would say, potential default in rent payment, possibility of damages beyond normal wear and tear. They flag that as a potential risk. So you can dig into that contract and understand the context of that. The start and end date, this is important because usually for these end dates, you want to get on top of these. If it's an auto renewal contract, there may be terms and conditions in there that if you do not respond within a certain period of the end of the contract, it automatically renews. This is the one that really seems to cost organizations a ton of money because they have contracts unaware of that are set to auto renew, and they're usually set up for terms and conditions that are not favorable for the organization, locking them in for another contractual period under non-favorable terms. And again, these are the things that if you build a process where you stay on top of the contracts, what can save you tons of money on the bottom line. The termination period, what is needed to terminate this contract? So again, have that auto renew flag, and if you don't terminate within 30 days of a written notice within 30 days of the last date of that contract period, this is where you get into a situation where it auto renews. And then it talks about the party names and then the party terms, so on and so forth. So this workflow condition just lets you know that the AI has processed this and it has extracted all of this information from the details of this contract. Again, this is where you can leverage AI, and I'm a huge, huge advocate on AI is more than just generating pictures, generating video, or doing some of the, or being wild about its fancy response. Once you do this intelligent automation, this is where you can start to move the needle on productivity, saving exponential amount of time within the organization, repurposing your work capital into higher value elements within the organization, and allowing the AI to do a lot of this grunt work, right? So is this a set and forget? No, you definitely want a human in the loop to where, it gets through and it process these contracts or what have you, but someone is validating these contracts and making sure that, the data that's extracted is where it needs to be. It's a spot check versus going through individually all 614 of these as a human. You can have the AI crank through these, and then you just set up a process to where you're reviewing and validating the extraction data from the AI, right? So we look at time. So for a human to go through this document, let's just say I'm going to pick on Ball & Son supplier, and extract out those, I think it's like 8 data points that you want to extract out from the contract. It probably would take someone who's pretty fluent in their job and know how to scan through these. They don't necessarily have to read everything word for word because you review contracts on the regular. So, things like you can scan through these and know when something is, oh, this is on par, this is pretty standard, or wait a minute, they're asking for something odd. So let's just say it would take someone who's very, very good, 10 minutes per contract to extract that data out. So they'll read it, and then what they would do, this is what we do in Classic, right? This is where a lot of organizations are doing, if this much, right? Most organizations don't even take it this far with their contract management process. So imagine you're reading that document and you're going through you do a risk assessment, and this is very subjective, and it could change day to day for the same person day to day, just to depend on how aggressive they're feeling, how non-aggressive they're feeling. So what they could have two weeks ago rated as a medium could be a low because of how they're feeling. Or it could be a high where 2 weeks ago it could have been a medium, but today it's a high because they just got off the phone with a situation where the risk, whatever condition, like the rent payment and damages, like the default on rent payment did not cover damages beyond normal wear and tear. And there was a situation that they just experienced with this. So now their antlers are super high. They're probably in a state of mind to overcorrect. And now everything we used to be a medium through standard terms are now a high due to recent events and situations that human was involved with. Again, so this takes the emotion out of it, and it takes the subject out of it, because what the AI is going to do with no emotion is just going to look at the data and rank these risk levels accordingly. So one, as a human, you have to get through the risk ranking. You have to determine the contract type. You have to scan through the document and pick out the start date, end date. You have to determine the terms of period. You need to read through and make sure there's not a clause in there that flags it for review. And then you need to capture all the party names and payment terms. So for an average human who's very skilled and experienced in this, let's just say it takes them 12 minutes, 15 minutes, let's round it up, 15 minutes per contract to extract that data. Okay, so we have 15 minutes times the number of contracts that they have to do that for, and that's going to be 614. So multiply that by 614. You got 9,210 minutes. These are level of effort man hours, man minutes. So you divide this by 60 to see how many hours this is going to be. That's going to put you at 153 hours to get through those contracts. And if you're doing 8-hour days, business days, so you divide that by 8. Actually, let's do 6. So just divide that by 6. So we're looking at about 25, let's say call it 26 business days to get through. And we all know there's like 18 to 20 business days within a month. So you're talking about 4 to 5 weeks to get through this process. For AI to process these 86. Okay, so if I look at the run history for this process, it took 19 minutes and 32 seconds to process those 86. So for every 86 contracts, it's going to take, let's just round this up, it's going to take 20 minutes for the AI to process that. So let's see what that is per contract. So I'm going to take 86, divide that by 20 minutes. So I'm on average 4.3 minutes per contract. And if I multiply that by the number of contracts that need to be processed, 614, it's going to take 2,640 minutes. And you divide that by, here's the thing with the AI, it's not limited to 8 hours a day. It's going to be able to process this 24/7 with no lunch break, no cigarette break, no water break. So let's just divide this. I'm going to give you 22 hours in the day. No, so this is 260/40.2 divided by 60. This is the number of hours, and divide that by, again, the AI doesn't need any lunch breaks, doesn't need any cigarette breaks, doesn't need any water breaks, doesn't need any mental walk around the building breaks. So divide that by 24 hours. It can get this, it can process all of those contracts in 1.8 days, right? And that's 24/7. So let's just round it up to 2 days. So here's the difference that organizations who are figuring out how to leverage AI, who are working with a partner that understands the technology, coupled with business SMEs within the organization that understand the business process. And what we're doing is we're taking a process that would normally take 26 days for a human to process and trimming that down with better quality results, quality meaning consistent results, because there's no human emotion into it, to 2 days to do the same amount of work. This is why a lot of people are getting excited about AI. A lot of CEOs and executives are getting excited about AI because they see that this is a productivity boost within the organization where you can do more than just automation. This is intelligence automation where you're taking a lot of those painstaking tasks from the human, offloading that to the AI, and then now you can really get a lot more done with less. So let's talk about the why. Like, why is managing contracts super duper important for organizations of any size? There is a study that suggests that 9.2% of the annual revenue, a study conducted by the World Commerce and Contracting Association, 9.2% of annual, this is top line revenue lost due to contract mismanagement. Contract value erosion, PricewaterhouseCoopers confirmed that 5% to 15% of the total contract value leaks through missed deadlines, scope creep, and untracked obligations, meaning that holding the other party feet to the fire to make sure that they are adhering to the terms of the contract. And this can get lost because your paralegal or your legal team is more on the text and evaluating the key attributes of the contract versus executing the spirit of the contract. So you can have the AI confirm the letter and the content of the contract by extracting those key metadata values, storing those into a SharePoint list, allowing you to sort, filter, get ahead of all your contract due dates, so on and so forth. So increase operational costs. So you can tell by, leveraging human capital to comb through these contracts and extract out key information, you can have 2% net profit loss of contract mismanagement. Most of this is because your paralegals and your legal team is distracted by doing a lot of the paperwork, right? And then there's inefficiency gaps, where the Aberdeen Group found that 33% of operational costs are increased due to contract mismanagement and the ineffectiveness to manage these contracts. Let's talk about the legal and the compliance risk. In these contracts, depending on your industry, there's certain regulatory compliance pieces that you have to adhere to. And some of these are deadline driven. Some of these are certain stipulations that you have to meet within a certain timeline. Most of those get missed because the review of the contract or it's not highlighted. So imagine, in our sample, we only have like 820 of these, so under 1,000. You can only imagine organizations that are much larger, how a miss in compliance and regulatory pieces, consuming or dealing with the fines that come with that, not necessary to handle the litigation or the reputable damages, can just drive the cost of contract mismanagement through the roof, thus impacting your bottom line. And we also talked about expiration oversights, making sure that all the pieces in the contract are hit before the contract end date. Also, the auto renewal. That's one of the key pieces that we've seen from time and time again from my research on this study with contracts and mismanagement. Those auto renew contracts with non-favorable terms that were defined 2 or 3 years ago at the beginning of the contract are now forcing organizations into another cycle because those auto renew dates were not caught and those guidelines were not updated based on the current market conditions and regulatory requirements. And again, this is just reiterating the inefficiencies of missed opportunity, the manual overhead, having your legal team distracted with working with the letter of the contract versus the spirit of the contract. With this new AI world that we're in, we're offloading those painstaking tasks, that heavy lift to the AI to where it summarize or highlight key important information about the contract for the human. So that way we can scan through there and make a deform and the decision based on the nature of the contract and how the project or the engagement is going. Again, the inability to negotiate delays because we're distracted with the letter of the contract. The wasted resources, 80% of business transactions are governed by the contract, and therefore increasing your efficiency on contract management is going to be key. Studies show that organizations that have a very well managed system for contracts can save anywhere between 15 and 20% in their contract management lifecycle. That's why, tools like these AI tools coupled with SharePoint and the document library just make that process that much more efficient. Having those review dates, triggering and alerting 60 days, 45 days, 30 days prior to the end date of the contract or prior to the renewal period of the contract are essential and critical. We notice that the reduced in risk, the AI analytics to reduce compliance up to 50%. Most of that is just because we're highlighting those key compliance items within the contract coupled with the review period just helps the paralegal or the legal team get in front of the key pieces that they need to focus on. Again, this is a time savings because most of these contracts are multiple pages, 10, 15, 20 pages. So spending the time to scan through all those pages to pick up some of this key information can be curtailed and saved by the AI highlighting, giving you the quote unquote cliff notes of the key items in that contract to allow a human to go through and scan and focus on those. That type of process, that type of streamline, as we saw, can save you 50% in the time needed of human working capital investment. The other thing that we saw this firsthand just through the simple case study that we went through with the presentation. You have 900 contracts. I'm going to round it up, 900 contracts. We calculated it would take approximately 22 to 23 business days for a human just to extract the key information about that contract to focus on. That's being replaced with the AI doing that 23-day process in 2 days. One, because the AI is going to be, you can work 24/7, no walking breaks, no cigarette breaks, no lunchtime, more than just an 8-hour day. So this is one of a set and forget. The batch job just runs and process this. And two, the time it takes to scan a contract and extract out that key metadata information for a human. I think it was like 15 minutes per contract. And for the AI, it was less than 5 minutes per contract. So there you go. These are the numbers. Mismanagement, you can save that 9.2 loss, which is a very well studied item for organizations across the globe. A 20% savings with an automation tool and leveraging AI. I think that number is probably a bit higher than that if you do it right, if you leverage the AI in a meaningful way. 50% in risk reduction. And again, this is just highlighting key information about the contract that the paralegal and the legal team need to focus on and not spend all the time needing to read through all the letter of the contract, have those items highlighted, have those items summarized, cliff notes, so that way the human can focus on the spirit of the contract and make sure that if any adjustments needed, any negotiations needed, any timelines or deadlines that need to be met, they can get up in front of that and not be distracted with the manual labor that can be offloaded to the AI. Okay, so in this segment, this is the who. So again, in this webinar, we talk about the what, the why, the who, and the how. So we talked about the what, the AI automation with contract management, and the why. And we talk about the stats on the amount of money and time wasted, not necessarily just managing contracts, but also missed opportunities with the mismanagement of the contract. And now we're going to talk about the who. Who is this impact within the organization. You imagine if you have an AI-driven contract management software or platform, who can benefit from that? In the end, it's going to be across many departments, right? Because a contract really starts with, like, just make, for example, a lease agreement for an office, right? So whoever is operations, whoever in charge of providing the office is one thing. If that office lease agreement gets renewed and we're all looking to upgrade and maybe move out because the company is growing, and that auto renews and it locks us in, that has a direct impact to the bottom line. So you can just tell how one contract can impact everyone across departments. Obviously, the legal and compliance team is going to be all over this. The legal team, we're going to offload a lot of that manual work. For compliance, we're going to be consistent on how we do the compliancy, how we rank the risks. Again, you imagine as going back to the scenario that I highlighted with the risk level. Having a human provide that risk level, we can overcorrect because of recent events. And all of a sudden, this would never happen to us again. So now everything becomes a high risk, adding more resources and time, because obviously when you have a high risk contract versus a low risk contract, there's many different eyes, scrutiny, and things along those lines. So mismanaging or miscategorizing a risk level for a contract can add way more time and effort and overhead than what it needs to be. You can see that the procurement and supply chain can really benefit from this, really just highlighting the vendor terms and the supplier that they're dealing with, making sure they're holding their feet to the fire to the SLAs and risk scoring, things along those lines. Again, this is the spirit of the contract to make sure that, we as an organization can execute the contract and we're not distracted by the letter and the details of it. You can easily see and imagine how fast it is to close the deals, right? Because when you do that risk level, one of the features I did not highlight that's also in that AI contract management tool is that it summarizes the contract. So instead of someone, before they read the details of it, here's a summary of what's in the contract. And then it highlights the risk areas that needs to be accounted for, the regulatory areas that may be missing depending on the industry that you're in, or maybe depending on the project or the nature of the contract, that the industries that are impacted by that. So highlighting those in those 15, 20, 30-page documents would just help you as your human capital to increase productivity. Now, this one, I really can't put a lot of weight on as far as like finance. Obviously, there's going to be a monetary savings to all of these contracts once you streamline it, not necessarily just the time savings and the money saved with analyzing and highlighting and categorizing these contracts and putting the metadata on the contracts, but the savings of missing an auto renewal, a savings of overcoming the fines for misregulatory or miscompliance pieces that are detailed in the contract and people are missing or organizations are missing. So that type of savings could be significant, especially depending on the type of organization that you're in. Risk management, again, offloading the heavy lift to the AI to deal with the letter of the contract allows a human capital to be more proactive, right? So now I'm getting ahead of these contracts before they're due. I'm getting ahead of easily identifying the compliance and regulatory pieces that need to be hit with my suppliers, with my vendors, or what we need to do as an organization for our clients and for our customers that are on the other side of this contract. Monitoring the compliance piece. And again, if you're focused on the nature of the contract, the things that need to be achieved, and you're not consuming, distracted with the letter of it, that's where you really start to find the efficiencies, the streamline of this. Who else could be impacted? HR. HR may deal with a lot of contracts with employees, even their suppliers for their HRIS systems and things along those lines. Different agreements that they may have with vendors or subcontractors that are coming on board to help the business execute a certain part of the business in a meaningful way. Policy consistency. Here's the other thing. When you have procedures and policies within the organization, we didn't get into this, but here's another use case that if you have AI involved in that process, you're executing policies in a more consistent, structured way. And reviewing and analyzing those policies and executing and drafting those policies and getting those in place for standard operating procedures within the organization, it would just really help streamline that process. And when you look higher up in the organization chain, you see how executives and leaders and board of directors can really start to benefit from this automated contractual agreement. Again, when anyone at the C-suite level, the board of directors level, or even your top level executives within the organization, they are extremely busy. They're multitasking. They have insights in multiple areas of the business. So when they're given a contract to either sign or to review or anything that requires their attention, having those cliff notes, having the AI to read a 65-page contract document, highlight the cliff notes, not just highlighting the information in the contract, but highlighting the information in the contract against the regulatory, the mission, the key goals of the organization. So now in your cliff notes of that 65-page document, it's going to highlight the risk, the compliant agreement, and so on and so forth. But those risk and those compliance pieces are going to be tailor-made to the risk tolerance of the organization, the compliance requirements for the organization within their respective industry. So, even the safety pieces for manufacturing, so on and so forth. So it's going to make sure that the interests of the organization, in addition to the details of the contract, are both balanced. And that's what gets highlighted for the board of director or for the executive to read through. So again, these are the people who are impacted. As you can see, it can stretch across multi departments within the organization, multiple roles from the top down, bottom up, and either side to side within the organization. Better contract management, just in short, has an impact on many people within the organization. Okay, so this wraps up our series for the webinar for AI contracts. We try to do these at least once a month. So we will see you on next time. If you would love to connect with us, there's our QR code with all of our information on our website. And you have the ability to reach out and book a call. And we would love to understand where you are on your AI journey, if there's any help that we can provide. But until then, I'll see you in the next session. Stay skilled up, my friend.